Today, I am thrilled to welcome Nikquan Lewis to the show. Nikquan is the founder of Intimate Connections PLC, a licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed professional counselor, and a relationship and sex therapist. With a sexual health certification in sex therapy, she's incredibly well equipped to guide individuals and couples through life's complexities. Nikquan has been featured in top publications like Essence, Cosmopolitan, and Glamour, and her mission is all about fostering deep connections and intentional growth. We're diving into what a healthy sex life really looks like, and I can't wait to hear her insights. Welcome to the Dangerous Women podcast, where the intersection of fierceness and femininity fuels empowerment. Our goal is to provide women with insights to unleash their power. Grounded in the 7 principles of self-confidence, we guide women to embrace their duality, delicate as a flower, yet powerful as a bomb. I'm your host, Colleen Conlon, inviting you to join me as we explore topics on health and wellness, empowering you to embody the essence of your dangerous woman. So, Nikquan, what is a healthy sex life?
First, thank you so much for having me, Colleen. I'm excited to be here and to have this conversation. And so, a healthy sex life is a loaded question because I'm a firm believer that a healthy sex life is a result of a healthy relationship. So, that alone means that there's respect, compassion, and trust. Those are the foundational needs of any healthy relationship. So, before you can get into the healthy sex life, you have to make sure you have a healthy relationship. So, then a healthy sex life is one that is co-created, meaning that me and my partner, we sit down, we have conversations, we talk about what's the ideal as it relates to frequency, pleasure, foreplay, right? All the things that I want to enjoy and things that my partner wants to enjoy. And then we come up with shared definitions for those things. Because if I want to have sex 5 times a week and my partner only has once, that doesn't jive, right? And so we have to compromise and make sure that our sex life represents both of us.
And I would imagine this is probably very different from couple to couple in that case.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's based off of personal preference, it's based off of perspective, it's based off of so many things.
So, what would you say some of the important steps after asking those questions, having those types of conversations with your partner is? And maybe we even back up a second. I mean, what does it say if you're uncomfortable to have those conversations with your partner? Because maybe there's some type of shame tied to how you feel about sex in general.
So, first, we start with emotional safety. This is why couples also come to me because there is a lot of shame, stigma around sex, especially in our culture, right? In this country, it's not something, now it's getting a little bit more freedom, but there are deeply rooted beliefs that color your experience, your sexual experience. And so I'm all about liberation. But first, it requires emotional safety. And what that means is that my partner and I have developed a safe space to have these conversations, and not just about sex, but about anything that may be sensitive. It sets the stage for vulnerability. And so you first have to create that safe space by making sure that you verbalize this is a judgment free zone. There is no shame here. We have the freedom, and we encourage each other to be open and honest about whatever. And so you set the stage for that, and then you're able to have these conversations.
So, if somebody is at a point where it's like, I don't know that I can even have this conversation, do they still go to somebody like you, or are they going to a different type of therapist before coming into a conversation like what we are having?
So, because the sex therapy is a postgraduate certification, my foundation is in marriage and family therapy, which is like a systemic thinking. So, I look at all parts of the person. So, you can absolutely still come to me because I do a lot of different things. But as a sex therapist in general, we help to dismantle shame. That's what
Mm.
we do. We help to create safe spaces. And so, yes, you could go to a sex therapist if you are experiencing shame around sex specifically.
Would you say more of the people who come to you are in that boat, or is it more times couples who are already starting to have these conversations and there's other reasons as to why they're coming to you?
There's definitely a mix.
Okay.
There's a large percentage of people who aren't having the sex that they want to have and the intimacy, because sex and intimacy are different, right? Sex is a physical type of intimacy, but they're not having the intimacy and sex they want. And they come to me because they want to take things to the next level. They want to start to explore. And then you have those couples who have pretty good sex lives, but they want to enhance, right? So people come to me for a number of things, all things regarding love and sex.
So I think we need to make it pretty clear for the sake of this episode that we are talking about the sex life, not necessarily the emotional intimacy on this episode. I think we should do a whole separate episode on that. But so that people who are listening to this, if you feel like you're a little bit more in the camp of, I need to work on the emotional intimacy with my partner, we're not just piggybacking back and forth between the two things. So if you're listening to this right now, you already feel like you have a safe space with your partner. The emotional intimacy that you have feels good, and you can have these conversations with your partner in regards to talking more about sex. So, on that note, you brought up before, one of the things sometimes people talk about is that the frequency at which they're having sex. So if somebody wants 5 times a week, but the other partner wants 1 time, how do you find middle ground on something like that? Or does it mean we're just not compatible, or I just need to do some solo work during the week because you don't necessarily want to be intimate with me?
So that's it's very common. One, none of us are perfect, right? None of us are puzzle pieces where we fit perfectly with each other. And so it's about compromise. Same things that happen in all relationships. We may be very compatible as it relates to sex and be on the exact same page. However, my encounter with couples is mostly that it takes some work. And one is not better than the other. It's just who is willing to put in the work, who is willing to put in the effort to be happy and have that healthy sex life with their partner. And so, for the example, one person wants five, one person wants one, both have to give, right? Both the person who wants five may have to bring it down a little bit, and the person who wants one may bring it up. But first, so these are again loaded questions, because when we're co-creating this, we have to talk about libido, sex drive, right? We have to talk about things that may be impacting that. If you are a girly like me who is in their early 40s, late 30s, early 40s, you could be experiencing perimenopause, and that can impact that, right? We have to talk about all the things that impact sexual health while we're talking about this frequency and this healthy sex life. And so we also have to talk about desire. That is a huge component of sex life. For somebody who's a spontaneous person and wants it that 5 times a week, because you know what? Sex is just on the brain. The wind can blow and they're feeling frisky, right? That's cool too. But for us responsive people who require stimulation, they require a stimulant of some kind, a smell, watching a sexy movie, reading an erotic book, right? They require physical touch. They require to be stimulated in some kind, some way, and then sex is on the brain. And responsive desire gets a bad rap as in, well, why you don't even think about it? What's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong at all. It's just how we get turned on. And but a lot of people don't have that language because they don't know that there's a difference. And especially if they are talking about what's wrong with you, and that completely can negatively impact your ability to connect sexually. So there's a lot of things to consider. So you can identify how you get turned on. You can identify if there's any barriers to libido, sexual health, and all those things. And then we can co-create. And we
I
also have to have grace.
Grace, yes. I second that. I just started reading the book on vacation, Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex. And in that book, they mention the words that you just brought up that I would love for you to elaborate on if you can. You brought up being spontaneous versus being responsive to sex. What does that mean for our listeners? Because you did describe it, but it's something when I read it in that book, I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, this actually makes a lot more sense. And then I shared it with my husband, and he was like, oh, this makes sense. So it's not like if one partner is responsive and the other one is spontaneous, that one person just like cares more about sex and the other person doesn't. It's just based on how you operate based on the season of life you're in, is what it sounds like. That's kind of what I gathered from the book. But you, as the expert, can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So libido and sex drive it does oftentimes change throughout the lifespan. So in your 20s, sex for a lot of people, not all, but for a lot of people, it just felt a little easier. But that's also because for a lot of 20-year-olds, there's a lot of less or not the life stressors that we have as married people, adults, folks that got bills and all the things, right? Stress impacts libido. So all these things change how you respond sexually. They change your capacity in general, right? If my capacity is low because I'm stressed out, because I got to pay my mortgage or whatever, yeah, might not be feeling as frisky as I used to be when I was fancy and free, right? And so understanding that it changes means that we need to have these conversations frequently, not just waiting until there's a problem. I'm very proactive with my couples. Let's get in front of some things. So even with like my premarital therapy that I do, we're going to establish that in the forefront. We're going to talk about sexual health in the forefront so we can plan for what we know is going to happen. So as it relates, and then of course I'm educating them on responsive desire and spontaneous so they can identify where they are in this chapter and understand that, like you said, it has nothing to do with whether I like sex or not. It's simply how I get turned on. I may be a person who requires more emotional connection, who requires more foreplay. And when I'm talking about foreplay, I'm not just talking about sex. I'm talking about how we engage and connect throughout the day and sex,
Can you
right?
elaborate on that? What does that mean, how we connect throughout the day?
So I am a huge proponent for people expanding their definition of sex, which includes also expanding their definition of foreplay. Foreplay is in everything, it should be in everything that we do. It's in how you greet your partner in the morning. It's in how you connect throughout the day. If you're sending each other sexy memes or something, and not just even sexy memes, but are you connecting at all? Because there's a lot of people that go throughout the day, they're working, there's no connection. And then you get home and then you're wondering why we're not connecting sexually. You haven't connected at all. Right. And so it's also connecting sexually. Like, what do you like? How do you like to get stimulated? How do you like to get turned on? So it's having all of these conversations to design the sex life that is perfect for you, design the relationship that is perfect for you. So expand that definition of foreplay. Tell your partner what you like as it relates to connection.
Can you give us some examples of what you find your clients bringing up as foreplay throughout the day? Some different examples?
So absolutely. So getting it's kindness. My couples that really want to reconnect, I will have them when they wake up in the morning, a kiss and asking each other, what's one thing that I can do for you today? What's one way that I can make you feel supported and loved? That's foreplay, right? If you feel like your partner doesn't give, you know what, you're not going to feel connected to them. You're not going to oftentimes want to connect sexually unless that's just your libido talking. It's not necessarily about the connection, right? So waking up and greeting your partner, hugs. There are a lot of people, especially during COVID, that suffered like touch deficiency. They weren't touching. And that carries over in relationships that are disconnected. When we hug each other, a chemical is released in the brain called oxytocin. It's literally called the hug drug, and it makes us feel connected and loved. And so, hugging each other, making sure that you're connecting some form of fashion. There are apps that you can get to just kind of connect throughout the day and nudge your partner just to let them know I'm thinking about you. Or you can send me a good old cat meme on Instagram. I love it. So it doesn't have to be anything raunchy.
I was gonna say, so cat meme is not code for anything. It's just
No,
a cat.
a cat meme. Yes. Cat's acting crazy. I love it. Just send me something to let me know that it's, and it could be our thing. So whatever it is, that's your thing with your partner. If it is something sexy, that's cool. But if it's not, it's about, are you thinking about each other? Yeah, we got to work. We got to work. We got to do the things. But some kind of way, let us put notes in. If somebody has a lunch, put a little note in their lunch. It's about being intentional and considerate. Those are absolute signs of foreplay.
Wow, that sounds like one of the simplest things that we can do to really make an effort in our life with our partners to feel more connected. And it kind of sounds like something that probably goes under the radar more times than none. Because as you're saying that, I've been in a 12-year relationship, and I'm just like, yeah, there's definitely times where me and my partner, we didn't talk at all until it was bedtime. Good night. And
Mhm.
at those points in time, I always kind of felt like I was more of a roommate with my partner than I was in this. I'm trying to figure out what the word is, but at times being in the marriage, at times just being the girlfriend, the fiance. And I think this insight is really helpful when you have a couple that comes in and you share this with them. What happens if one partner is really into the idea of doing this stuff and the other person's kind of resistant?
So that happens quite a bit, especially if I'm talking about scheduling sex. And
Mm,
so for couples that are not having sex, the sex that they want, I will recommend scheduling it. And we talk about it. So it's not, it doesn't have to be robotic at all, but you will have people, partners that are resistant to it. And I explained that, especially if we're talking about scheduling sex, please understand the ones that are scheduling it and are engaging, they're having it. So the ones that are unwilling, you're gonna stay in the same space that you're in. And so if you're going to try some things, then what are we doing? Because you are guaranteeing not getting your needs met when you are unwilling to try something.
mm.
And so that pretty much gets them on board once they understand that. Is what do you have to lose to try something when you know you're not having the result that you want? So let's try these things. These things are tried and true, and they work for those that give the effort.
I would also imagine in the relationship, if one partner is saying, hey, can we try this stuff? And the other one's like, no, I don't want to. It probably doesn't make the other partner feel good because sex is such a vulnerable thing.
Absolutely. I'm always telling them consider what you're communicating, not just verbally, but with your body language. What is the underlying message, right? What may you be communicating that you might not want to?
Mm,
Right? So your intention. So I teach everybody intention versus impact, right? Intention mean a person's intention can be as good as gold, right? My intention might be, let's say, if I'm a person who isn't really wanting to try because I'm tired, maybe I'm going through something with my libido, I'm stressed at work. Maybe my intention is to protect my capacity, right? But the impact must be considered, and that oftentimes gets missed. So the impact to your partner, what does it communicate to them? Maybe they feel rejected. Maybe they feel unwanted. Maybe they feel unloved, right? And so this is not just about sex. This is anything at all. Always consider your intention, but definitely think about the impact because it matters and it lasts. And the person oftentimes remembers that impact more than they do the intention. Both parts matter, but definitely consider both.
so, in that case, if you do have a partner who's really going through something and the other partner, they want to be more intimate than the other one is willing to be at this point in time, given lifing for them, how do you compromise in that situation so that it doesn't negatively impact the other partner feeling rejected or dismissed? When we talk about sex in general, And I'm going to refer back to that book. I think it's like really interesting timing how I started reading that and now we're having this conversation. In that book, it was interesting because I read in part of it when we look at heterosexual couples, the majority of them think sex is penis inserting into vagina, it's intercourse. But when we look at more lesbian couples or gay couples or anybody who does not fit that heterosexual identity, there's so much more stuff that's listed on the table as sex.
Big
So,
time.
so can you maybe share with us what those other options are, and if there is partner A who life is lifing for them, they're stressed, they don't necessarily want to like do the thing. Is there anything else that maybe could be working in partner B's favor or A and B can compromise on that isn't necessarily intercourse? And I get that not everybody listening to this episode right now is a heterosexual couple, but can you give us some insight in that specific situation?
Absolutely. First, it's important to understand that for someone who life is lifing, it depends on what's going on with them because sometimes any kind of sex is not on the table. If they have any kind of medical issue, if grief will knock your socks off, right? And so sex is not on the table. So depending on what's happening, there has to be conversation, vulnerable conversation, talking about where you are and also seeking help. Because even if this person A is not in a place where they can engage because maybe they have a major loss, communicating that to person B and also getting some support around that. So you get through it and you're not staying in it
Mm,
can bring a lot of grace. Huge proponent, your partners, you deserve grace and your partner deserves grace, right? So having that conversation because sometimes it's not an option given what's going on. Now, if that's not the case, right? And we are talking about expanding again our definition of sex. It is so many different things. I absolutely talk about how sex is not just about penetration. It's oral. It's exploring each other's bodies. Their body has several erogenous zones, and erogenous zones, when stimulated, can lead to orgasm. But at the same time, I educate people. Orgasm needs to not be the goal. Pleasure needs to be the goal, right? And pleasure should be experienced in so many different things. Sex is how you touch. It's how you kiss, right? It's how you can, it's penetration as well. But there's toys, right? You can have it's shared masturbation. There's so many things that you can do that do not involve penetration, but you have to open your mind to exploration. And that's also what I help couples do to redefine what is sex. It doesn't have to have penetration at all, and you can still have mind blowing pleasure and orgasms. Orgasm is one type of pleasure, but let's not limit that.
wow. I think that is so cool that you shared all of that right now. And I'm sure there are people who are listening to this episode thinking, okay, maybe I need to redefine what this is in my relationship. And do you have any tips for anybody who just had maybe that aha moment and it's time to share it with their partner and they're not entirely sure how to bring it up, but they know they want to bring it up?
Absolutely. For that very reason, I have developed, and I have them right here actually, my How Do You Want It Relationship and Sex Conversation cards. And if you
Yes.
don't, listen, if you don't have the language, that is absolutely okay because so many don't. Not only do so many not have the language, so many didn't learn how to create healthy relationships. And I don't know about you, but me coming up, there was no talk about sex at all. It was just don't do it. Right. And that was it.
Yeah.
And so that attributed, not caused, but attributed to me becoming a teen mom, lack of information, right? And so I created these cards for individuals to identify their wants, needs, and desires. Because, first of all, you have to love you intentionally. And then when you are in a relationship, let's co create some things by having shared definitions. If
Mm,
I'm talking about intimacy as it relates to sex, But you're talking about intimacy as it relates to emotional connection or quality time. We're not having the same conversations. And that is why couples have the same argument over and over. They're not having the same conversations.
Kettlebell Catalyst, the exercise guide for women to build strength, lean muscle, and self-confidence to overcoming limiting beliefs, is a book I wrote for women to be empowered to get started with kettlebells. In this book, not only will you learn the 101 details of hardstyle kettlebell technique, but you will also meet lots of women who were brave enough to try using kettlebells and hear how they transformed both physically and mentally. To buy your copy, visit Amazon or Barnes & Noble today.
And so, if anyone needs support in having these conversations, there are resources that are available that will ask the question for you, and it takes the pressure off. There's a lot of couples that I work with, and they'll feel like their partner is like throwing some subliminal messaging or whatever. But if I'm asking the question, baby, you can blame me, right? So this is what the card says. This is, I'm not trying to say anything. This is what the card says. Let's discuss it. So there's tons, there are resources like the How Do You Want a Relationship and Sex Conversation card deck that will assist you with building a healthy foundation for your relationship while also helping you to establish that and design that healthy sex life.
Wow. Where do we get those cards?
You get those cards right on my website at intimateconnectionspllc.com.
Okay. And then what would you say, or can you give us an example of anybody who's used those cards and things just like really did a 180 or changed something for them? Do you actually use the cards with your clients, or is it more people you do?
I absolutely do. I use them in session. One, I use them with my own husband. I use them in session. I use this with my children. I have adult children.
Okay.
My children, my daughter's 24, my son is 18. And especially with my son I just dropped him off to college last week. I gave him a very comprehensive relationship and sex like workshop that I do with teens because one, I ain't got time to be nobody's grandmama right now. But two, I know the statistics around depression and anxiety as it relates to teens, especially in college, right? So I want him to know how to build that healthy relationship. He has the information. He knows the 5 types of intimacy. All of these things based off of this card deck. And so with him, with couples, with my colleagues, they use them with their couples as well. And couples are reporting the best sex that they've ever had because it's based off of communication, and they again didn't have the language to create that on their own, so they use this and now they're talking about things that they would have never talked about. And I'll give you an example. One of the cards is like, what are your belief systems on like porn? If we are not talking about porn and masturbation in our relationships, you are leaving room to break trust. There are a lot
Mm.
of people that feel like their partner watching porn may be infidelity, but if you don't have that conversation, then how could somebody know? Right. And so we have to have these conversations so that we are building trust and not breaking it.
Wow. Wow. That is really, I'm trying to figure out what my follow-up question is to that because now I'm thinking about porn and my head is going in all these different ways. But it's so true, if you did not grow up in a sex positive household, how do you necessarily have these conversations if you haven't had the opportunity to find good resources like this deck of cards to help give you the words to be able to share with your partner? And I think the piece on communication, it's so key for any of our relationships if you want something to go in a positive direction, because nobody's a mind reader.
Absolutely.
Do you ever
Absolutely.
do you ever have couples who are just like, well, he should know this or she should know this. This is how it's always been. And do things change? Like, is it right to say just because this is how your relationship was year one, year two, year three, it's not necessarily going to be how it is from a sexual standpoint in year 5 or year 10 or year 15?
100%. That is probably 99% of my couples they come in with a very closed mindset, right? And they have their own perspectives and they're stuck in that. I teach couples to respect and honor each other's perspectives because they're different. My perspective is based on my childhood, my traumas, my lived experiences, what I've gotten and learned in society, right? All the things, all the relationships that I've had, that colors my perspective. It is going to be completely different from yours. And that needs to be okay. But oftentimes when couples come to me, it's not. This is what it is, right? Very black and white thinking.
Mm,
And we dismantle that for sure.
that sounds dangerous.
It is, but it's very common.
Mm.
It's very common, right? And so once we learn to honor each other's perspectives, then I teach them how to listen with new ears. We have to throw those old ears away because they no longer fit. I've been married almost 9 years and with my husband 17. And so I am not the same person. I was a whole fool when in my early 20s, right? So I'm 42 now. I'm not the same person I was last year. And so if we don't grow, if our communication doesn't grow with us, you will be stuck in a relationship that no longer serves you.
Mm.
So it is imperative. It is okay. It is okay. And I validate that people don't have the knowledge, they don't have the language because they weren't taught. That is very common and it is okay. But it's not okay to stay there because there are resources available. There is support available, and you can have the relationship that you want if you're willing to step outside your box, if you're willing to get some support, if you're willing to change with, if the relationship is going to change with you, you got to bring it along. And you do that through communication and honoring the growth that is happening in your relationship so that you guys grow in the same direction. You may not be on the same exact time, but so that you're not growing away from each other.
Does that come up in conversations with couples where somebody's like, man, my wife or my husband really feels like they're just growing in the opposite direction and people change, people grow, and we're just growing apart. So maybe we're just done. Do you ever, make the comment like, no, let's not think that way? Or is the answer,
It depends. The
okay,
answer is all day. It depends because yes, it happens. You said you've been married 12 years?
relationship 12 years, married 7 years.
Yes. So, I mean, it happens. Again, I'm not the same person, neither is my husband. And for us, we did not have an image of healthy relationship. And even if you have an image of healthy relationship, if no one is communicating to you, talking you through building a healthy relationship, chances are you are doing the best that you can with what you have, but sometimes what you have is not enough. So that does create space for a lot of relationship trauma. And so there are a lot of people that are in that very spot where they feel disconnected. They're wondering, what the heck am I doing here still? Right. But they know they love their person, but they're not happy. So
Mm,
I get that all day. And for that, I offer intensives. I do couples intensives with clients. And this is more so coaching. So it's open to everybody where we are talking about how to reconnect. For those that are willing. For
mm,
those that are like, you know what, I'm ready to sign my name on the dotted line, we can talk through how to do that amicably. But
mm.
for those who are just feeling disconnected but want to try, they feel like maybe they've not done everything. There are couples intensives, virtual couples intensives, where we dismantle that old relationship and we build one that is based on those foundational needs of a healthy relationship, but also represent who you are today. And that could look night and day from the relationship that you initially entered. And that's okay.
I know, again, the answer is going to be it depends, but for anybody who resonates with what you just said there, and it's like the last straw, but I don't want to sign my name, is there one question you would encourage to come up in that relationship that could spark a bigger conversation or a better conversation?
Readiness versus willingness. There is a difference between being ready to do something and being willing. If I am ready, that means I'm comfortable, I'm confident, I'm sure. But willingness is more so, I don't know about this, right? But I'm willing to try
Mm,
anyway. To ask yourself, are you ready versus willing to do the work? You may be ready or more leaning towards uncertainty, but are you willing to try?
Mm,
And also assessing the cost of both decisions. Divorce is very expensive. And I'm not just even talking financially, I'm talking emotionally. The impact to the relationship, the impact to children if you haven't. That does not mean that it's not always the best option. Sometimes it is the best option. As a marriage and family therapist, sometimes it is the best option. But if you feel like, have I done my all? Does this relationship, has this relationship held value for me? If it has held value for me and it is a safe space, no healthy relationship is, all healthy relationships are free from abuse of any kind. Let's just throw that out there. But if this is a safe space and it has held value and you feel like you've not done everything that you can do, then I would say see what resources are available.
mm,
Because sometimes people will go to therapy and they won't have the best experience. All therapists are not going to be a perfect fit. And so that's important to understand. If you didn't have a great experience, don't throw therapy out the window. Try someone else. But it's more so, am I willing to do the work?
mm.
It's not easy,
Yeah.
but it can be very fruitful.
I think this is great. And I think for anybody listening, resonating to that piece, oh my gosh, you got homework. But for those who are more in the boat of, no, things are good. I just want to maybe check off that what I have going on is actually healthy and it feels good. Is that it? Does it come down to I have a healthy sex life because my partner feels fulfilled, I feel fulfilled, they're having fun, I'm having fun? Like, is that it? Or is there something else we need to be looking for to get that confirmation that everything is a-okay?
So that confirmation comes from the sex life that you have designed.
Mm,
Those check marks are based off of you and your partner, right? And so if you feel fulfilled, and you may still feel fulfilled but also want some more exploration,
mm,
right? And so it literally is limitless. But if you want to kind of check those marks, compare it to what you've defined as a healthy sex life. Are
mm,
you guys communicating about it? Are you meeting your frequency with understanding that it's not balance in a relationship, balance in a sex life is not about 50-50. It's not going to be here. It fluctuates, right? But the goal should be that one person is not always carrying the heavy load. That's not what balance is. Balance should fluctuate. And sometimes I may need you to bring me up a little bit because I'm not doing my best because life is lifing, but that should be the exception to the rule, right? And so for couples who are having a fabulous sex life, sometimes actually have a how spicy is your sex life quiz. And so it's super fun, but
where
it
is
also gives you
that?
insight. I will give you that and then you
Okay,
can
we'll put in
share
the
it.
show notes.
Yes,
Okay.
but it's how spicy is your sex life? And it's super fun, but it gives a lot of couples insight because when I'm in person at like events, I'll have them take it. And oftentimes they will find that their results are very different.
Mm,
One person is thinking, oh, they are knocking it out the park. And the other one is like, oh, dead fish, dead in the water. Right. And so sometimes it's not that drastic, but sometimes somebody thinks that they're knocking out the park and somebody's like, oh, yeah, we cool, but I need
mm,
more. Right. And so it gives a lot of insight. And so for those people that are having great sex, but just they crave a little bit more, there are resources for that. And
mm,
so there are intensives for that also. I actually have the Intimate Explorations Transformative Series, which is a couples intensive that helps couples to reconnect, but also helps couples to take things to the next level. So wherever you are, if you want support taking to the next level, you want support reconnecting, understand that there are resources for you.
do you think that sex in a relationship is something that should be like ever evolving? Like, for example, if you have a couple, they have a healthy sex life, they're on the same page, is it kind of like we need it to continue to evolve? We need things to continue to change at some type of duration in order for things to always feel good?
Nope. If it's
No.
not a problem,
Okay.
it's not a problem.
Okay.
If it's, and that is for anybody. For couples, you have couples who can't have sex for medical reasons, a number of reasons. It's not a necessarily, it's not a priority for them. If it's not a problem, it's not a problem.
Mm,
So for couples that are on the same page, they're experiencing great sex and they're happy and excited about it. Do you? If it's not a problem, it's not a problem. But you have some that are having that great sex, but they are interested in more. That's not necessarily a problem. But let's talk about what that more looks like. Now we're talking about, and we should always be talking about what are your fantasies, right? What are
mm.
your fantasies? What are your desires? Are you fantasies exist in the brain? Because sometimes people are afraid to share that with their partner because they think that it's a little too freaky deaky, but they exist in the brain. It does not mean that someone wants to live out that fantasy, but there are some people that do, right? And so it's about communication and understanding, this is my fantasy and I want to try it, or this is my fantasy and it just excites me. And so couples that want to explore that, I help them do that as well.
I feel like that's probably, there's like a lot of it depends. I'm like trying to reserve the questions I want to ask you in regards to that topic in general. But is there ever a time if your partner shares something like that and they are not expecting it? Like, is there a graceful, I'd love to bring that word back in. Is there a graceful way to share a fantasy with a partner where you're like, I don't know how they're going to take this? Because again, it might not be that I want to act it out, but it's what's going on in my mind and I want them to know it. What words would you encourage somebody to use to start that conversation?
I would reiterate the emotional safety piece, right? We're setting the stage. I want to share something with you that's a bit vulnerable. Can we make sure that this is a judgment free, shame free zone, right? And so if you're working with me, we've already discussed that, we've already established that, and we continuously establish that because you have to remind people that this is what we're doing, right? And also be mindful. So, a safe space means that we're being mindful of our body language, we're being mindful of our facial expression. I am always telling somebody in session, fix your face.
Mm.
Because if I tell you something and you do all the things, I'm not going to tell you nothing else, right? Because that feels like judgment. May not be, maybe more shock, but intention versus impact, right?
Mm.
So, absolutely set the stage, safe space, vulnerability, and utilize I mirror my statements. I feel, I want, I desire. And this is something that I've just been thinking and being clear. I've been thinking this. This is not something that I am at this point wanting to try, but I do want to share it with you because you're my partner. Maybe I want your input. Maybe I don't. Maybe I just want to kind of tell you what I'm thinking. And so setting the stage for, I want to share something with you. Is this a good time? Do you have the capacity? Right. This is something that makes me feel a little nervous. Right. And I'm looking for you to support me just in this conversation, not with this thing. Right. So it's being clear and it's using words like fantasy. If you've already kind of defined, if you have shared definitions of things, then you already understand that this is something that I think about. It's not necessarily something I want to explore.
And if the other partner shuts down after sharing something like that as gracefully as you just did to give us the words, then what?
Then intention versus impact. That shutdown might be, I don't know what to do with this. It might be, this scares me. This might be, I'm feeling like I'm not enough, right? It might be their lack of emotional regulation in that moment. But what you're communicating is, this is not a safe space. You're communicating, I can't tell you something because you can't handle it,
Mm.
right? And so that oftentimes will cause the other person to shut down. And now we're not having the communication that we need. And so I would encourage you to verbalize. Ooh, I am listening. I am here. I don't necessarily know what I think about this, but if you don't say anything and you deflate, think about what is communicating to your partner. And it happens. It happens. Communication is not going to be perfect. And so if that is you, if you have shut down in that moment, come back and talk about it. What were you experiencing? Let them know it was not me judging you. That was not my intention. I just was shocked or whatever. I want to hear more or whatever the case may be. But it happens. It happens a lot, actually.
It seems like if that's the situation that you're in with your partner, this would be a really good time to bring somebody like you into the mix who can help give the words to one another to help everybody realize this is actually what's going on, so you don't shut down or start one-upping on your partner. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because again, we have to create, so many people don't understand the power of shared definitions and they don't have them. Not one couple I have worked with, I've been doing this a long time. When they come to me, they have shared definitions, and I will ask them, you guys have shared definitions? Yeah. They don't. They don't. They don't necessarily understand what that is. And so if you understand what a fantasy is together, we're talking the same language, then that may minimize the impact to you when you feel like, oh my God, is my partner going to try to do this on his own? It just brings a lot of narratives, right? And so absolutely, that is when you come to me or just to get on the same page. Don't wait until there's been a lot of relationship trauma, right? Because you guys are not talking the same things then coming. That's when people come.
Yeah.
That's okay. But I encourage, let's be more proactive in our relationships.
As we get ready to wrap up this episode, in that case, when is the ideal time you would encourage a couple to come in? Does there need to be an issue in order to come in? Does it need to be before embarking on marriage? It shouldn't necessarily be like when you're at the last straw, but that seems to be when a lot of people come. You as the expert, when would you like to see couples coming in, and does there need to be a problem in order to seek out a sex therapist?
No, there does not need to be a problem. I love couples that come in for premarital therapy. I'm a big advocate for it. I myself did not go to it, and I wish that I had. There would have been, it gets in the way, or it dismantles the relationship trauma that happens when you're just kind of going all willy-nilly and doing the best that you can with what you have. But we all have stuff, and we're bringing that stuff into our relationship. So premarital therapy helps you to sort that stuff out and get on the same page, so you're not harming each other, right? And so you do not have to have a problem. You could absolutely want to make sure, I want a healthy sex life with my partner, right? I want healthy intimacy with my partner. And I know that we don't necessarily have the language, or we want to make sure that we have the language. So you do not have to, yes, you come to me when there is a problem, but you can absolutely come to me because you want to be proactive and you want to build that healthy relationship and healthy sex life that is perfect for you two.
If there was one final thought to share with our listeners on today's episode in regards to what is a healthy sex life, what would that last piece be coming from you?
That last piece would be to know that a healthy sex life is simply based off of what you and your partner desire. It is not going to look like anybody else's, and it doesn't need to, but it is based in communication and it is based in effort.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Dangerous Women podcast. If you had any groundbreaking takeaways from today's episode, please tag us on social at the Dangerous Women podcast. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe below.